At 9:02 a.m., my boss introduced my months of work as his brainchild. At 9:19, the room learned the truth. Live, on the big screen. He never saw the trap I set, and he never saw the exit coming. If you've ever had your work stolen, hit like and subscribe. Around here, we stand up for people who are told to take notes, while someone else cashes in on their ideas. Drop your own story in the comments. Your voice matters here. There's a specific kind of silence that lives in offices. Not the calm kind. This one hums. It's the drone of air vents and cheap coffee machines, the muted clatter of keyboards, the polite laughs that never reach the eyes. I used to love it. It felt like a stage. Rows of monitors. A city view I never had time to notice. And me, in my little corner, building something that made sense of chaos. My name is Emily. I was a senior product analyst in a mid-sized software company whose executives loved to say, we were punching above our weight. Translation, we did more with less because people like me gave it everything we had. I'd been working on a project I called Lantern, a predictive churn model bundled with a simple, almost elegant dashboard that could tell our customer success team who was about to walk away and why. Not just a risk score, but a pathway. Which feature gaps hurt retention, which outreach sequence worked last time, which clients loved our product but hated our billing cycle. It took me 3 months to make it sit up and talk. 3 months of nights where the sky outside the window dissolved into a faint, tired blue. 3 months of whispers from my desk buddy Maya, go home, and the quiet insistence of my own heart counting out the beats as I pushed one more commit, one more cleanup pass, one more layer of polish on the UX so no one would have to ask where to click. I named every file carefully. I wrote doc strings like I was leaving a message to a future version of myself. What you were thinking here, what you changed there, the bug that broke your Saturday, the fix that finally held. I saved screenshots. I kept a separate diary and notes. Lantern Day 47, baseline beat. Lantern Day 61, retention uplift, 10.6% on cohort B. Lantern Day 74, onboarding factor stronger than expected, double-check sample bias. It made me feel sane. It made me feel like the work was mine, because it was. Enter Darren. He wasn't my direct manager when I started the project. He'd been hired from a larger company to run our product operations team. Sharp haircut, expensive shoes, a vocabulary full of buzzwords that bounced off the ceiling tiles. He called everyone rock star in a way that made the word heavier, not lighter. We move fast, he said on his first day, palms open, smile perfectly controlled. We don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. My manager was on parental leave right when Lantern began to look less like an experiment and more like a solution. That's when Darren became interim manager. Just for a few weeks, HR said. Just to shepherd things. I didn't like that verb. At first, it was small things. He'd drop by my desk at 6:45 p.m., when the floor had thinned out, look over my shoulder, ask for a quick spin of the dashboard. He'd nod, ask one sharply framed question that would have impressed a bystander. This variable, why's it weighted so heavily? Multicollinearity? Good eye, I'd say. I've regularized it. The signal still pops. He'd clap his hands softly. Rockstar. I thought maybe I'd found an ally. He offered to look over my slide deck. I can help you shape the narrative, he said one evening, leaning in just a little too close. Executives listen to stories before numbers. Let me translate. I sent him the deck. He sent me back a cleaned version with my name moved to the last slide. Acknowledgements. He called me into a tiny glass huddle room and spoke like a coach. We'll make a bigger splash if the story comes from the ops side, he said. I'll position it, then I'll toss to you for the demo. Classic 1-2 punch. He smiled. Trust me, I didn't, not fully. But I told myself this was normal politics. I told myself what matters is the project getting adopted. I told myself no one who mattered would miss where the work came from. Then the all-hands pre-brief happened. I wasn't invited. I heard about it because Maya forwarded me the calendar invite title she'd seen pop up on Darren's screen when he asked her to print something. Exec pre-read, Operation Beacon, Retention Initiative. Darren H. Not Lantern, Beacon. And not me. Not anywhere. My stomach tightened like a fist. I pushed my chair back and walked to the bathroom, not because I needed to, but because I needed to move. The hallway smelled faintly like citrus disinfectant. I stared at the mirror and tried to slow my breathing. Names shouldn't matter, I told myself, but names are how ownership travels through a company. Names are how credit cashes out into promotions, raises, a chair at the table. Names are how stories get told later, when no one remembers who was there. I went back to my desk and opened the new deck he'd shared that morning. The title slide, Operation Beacon. The subtitle, presented by Darren H. Product Ops. There was a slide with key team contributors, but it was stacked like a pyramid with Darren at the top, and then bullet points in a smaller font. Data support, E. Park. Me. Data support. Like I'd fetched spreadsheets and smiled, I scrolled deeper. He'd rewritten my problem statement to sound like his origin myth. He'd removed the slide where I wrote the pipeline origin paths, our validation criteria, the notes about fairness and bias that mattered to me because we weren't just guessing who would churn. We were shaping attention, and attention becomes pressure. He'd left in every colorful chart. My hands trembled. Not metaphorically. It's a weird feeling to watch your own work wear someone else's face like a tailored suit. It makes your chest hot and your fingertips cold. It makes you feel like a stranger in your own body. It makes you want to scream and then sleep for a week. At 5:10 p.m., he called me into a conference room with glass walls and a too bright ceiling. The projector hummed. He stood in front of my slides and gestured like a man selling a house he knew wouldn't pass inspection. "We're going to nail this," he said. "But I'll need you to be there, front row. If they ask a technical question, you jump in, okay? Keep it tight, don't over-explain." "Why was my name moved?" I asked. He blinked, just once. "Optics," he said, sympathetic smile returning like a screensaver. "Executives need a single point of contact. You and I know you did the heavy lifting, and I will make that crystal clear when the time comes." He tilted his head. "We're on the same team." Something in me froze, then thawed into a slow-burning certainty. I could argue. I could threaten to walk. I could cry. All of that would be absorbed by the carpet and the walls and the practiced nods of a man who'd been doing this longer than I'd had a seat here, or I could take notes. Careful ones, the kind with timestamps. That night, I stayed late, not to refine the model, but to archive everything. I exported the Git commit history to PDF. I took screenshots of version history on the deck with "created by Emily Park" and the date 3 months ago. When the title was still Lantern 0.1, I saved Slack threads where Darren wrote, "Your lantern idea might be the thing that saves Q3 and don't oversell it to others yet. Let's keep the circle tight." I printed emails where legal had me fill out a data sharing checklist, addressed to me, CC'd to Darren. I uploaded my diary notes to a private folder and then emailed that folder to my personal account with a subject line I'd recognize later. Lantern evidence. Personal. Because I didn't know what I'd need. Only that I would need it. When I finally shut my laptop, the office had gone full ghost. The cleaner's cart squeaked somewhere down the hall. The city lights looked like static. I could feel my heart in my throat and the clock in my bones. I didn't sleep. I lay there listening to my neighbor's bass, to the hum of my fridge, to the sound of my own mind replaying the deck over and over until the sun bleached the night into a gray that made no promises. At 8:04 a.m., an invite hit my inbox. Executive review, Operation Beacon, 9:30 a.m. Boardroom A? I wasn't on the list. I stared at it. Then I stared at myself in the black mirror of the screen. I'm not dramatic by nature. But I have a mean, quiet streak that shows up when someone tries to take something I bled for. I forwarded the invite to myself, with a comment to my private email. He forgot to include me. Then I stood up, grabbed my notebook, and walked into Boardroom A, 10 minutes early, with the most ordinary smile I could make. Note-taking support, I told the admin setting up pastries. She nodded and didn't ask questions. Darren walked in at 8:53, scent of cedar cologne preceding him. He paused when he saw me. "Great," he said, a fraction too loud. "Emily's here to help with any technical clarifications." He hadn't expected me, but he needed me. The model he was about to present didn't just run on slides. It ran on details. The executives filed in. The CEO, crisp and distant. The CFO, eyes like a hawk behind thin glasses. The new SVP of Customer, a woman named Annika I hadn't met but had Googled the night before. Ops background, earned reputation for cutting through fluff. The CHRO, late, with a tablet she never looked up from. I noticed everything. People remember the worst days in high definition. I took my seat near the wall. I smoothed my notebook open. My pen hovered. The AC hit the back of my neck like a warning. Darren cleared his throat, smiled at the front row. "Good morning," he purred. "I'm excited to share an initiative my team has been incubating, an approach to churn, reframed." My jaw flexed. My pulse found a drum. He clicked to the first slide. I wrote the time. 9:02. The injustice had a stage. To understand the revenge, you have to understand the weeks that built the pressure, like water behind a dam that looks fine until the hairline fractures show. After that pre-brief, Darren began to sand my name off everything like it was rust. He CC'd me less and less on important emails. He invited me to listen in on calls where he talked about my design principles like they'd visited him in a dream. He asked me to send over your notes so he could polish them for exec-facing comms. He used we and Slack when things looked promising and you when something broke. I tried the straightforward path first. I scheduled a one-on-one with him. I closed the glass door and sat down across from his immaculate posture. "I want my name on the deck," I said. "You're on the contributor slide," he said kindly. He had this way of softening his voice when he lied. "Emily, you're invaluable, but I need to be the tip of the spear with the execs. That's how this works." "It's not how it works," I said. "It's not how it should work." He leaned back, laced his fingers behind his head in the universal pose of men who feel invincible. "I hear you," he said. "Let's get this across the line." After that, promotions, visibility, all of it. Trust me, I didn't. The next day, HR posted the slate for mid-year promotions. My name wasn't there. Darren's justification in the manager notes. Someone always leaks these. High-output analyst with strong technical chops. Needs to demonstrate impact at the executive level. I tasted metal. I went to HR because that's what you're supposed to do. The HR partner had a plant on her desk that drooped at the tips, like it knew. She listened to me with concern correct as a clock. She asked, "Do you have documentation?" I said yes. She said, "We can't arbitrate credit disputes, but we can ensure norms are followed." She suggested I try to resolve directly, but to keep HR posted should any retaliation occur. Retaliation occurred. Subtle, deniable, a calendar invite to a stakeholder alignment meeting, where my role in the description was note-taker. Casual comment in a cross-functional huddle that, "Emily's great with data, but we need someone who can zoom out at the narrative level." A gentle warning from a friendly PM that Darren says you can be a little intense in reviews. Maybe just read the room more. Read the room. The room that became a mirror maze where nothing was straight anymore. I stopped sleeping through the night. I'd wake up at 3:17 a.m. with sentences running through my head like code. If then else, trap catch, finally. I'd microwave water, forget the tea bag, hold the mug anyway, and watch the dark window watch me back. A hum lived in my bones. Then, the schedule. Executive review. Operation Beacon. 9:30 a.m. Boardroom A. The big one. The room where decisions get laminated. I was not on the invite, but I knew by a small miracle of timing and incompetence that Darren would need me anyway. The deck had a live demo section, not fully canned, because the numbers mattered, and numbers move every day. The script included a data quality question he'd added to show we were rigorous. He sent me a message at 7:12 a.m. "You'll be nearby for the demo, right? Just in case the dashboard needs a hand. Just in case. Like the sun rises just in case day needs light," I typed. "Of course." Then I opened my folder named Proof and added 3 new files. One was a simple, sheet white document titled Lantern Project Timeline and Contributors. It wasn't dramatic. It was a table with dates, links, and who did what. It had links to the Git commits that showed my author name, the Slack threads, the emails. It had Darren's comments on my early deck, We should call this lantern, irony, and we need to sell the vision, not the plumbing. It had the legal data checklist email addressed to me. It had the JIRA ticket where I'd opened the initial exploration story. The second file was a copy of Darren's deck, but with a hidden slide after his next steps called Provenance. A quiet slide. White background. Black text. Origin of work and audit trail. Then bullet points with links. Version history. Created by Emily Park on date. First prototype demo. Emily to Darren. Date. Subject line. Lantern baseline beats. Legal checklist initiated by Emily. Date. It wasn't accusatory. It was documentary. The third thing wasn't a file. It was a line in my notebook, written and rewritten until I could say it without shaking. Could we open version history? I think we just need to verify the origin date for legal sake. Not, you stole my work. Not, you're a liar. Just a question. Simple, disarming, undeniable. In its implications, I didn't want to commit a crime. Secret recordings, hacked inboxes. It's tempting in movies, but in real life it destroys victims as often as villains. I stayed lawful, boring, relentless. I knew something Darren didn't. In a company terrified of compliance risk, provenance is power. I needed one more thing. An adult in the room, so I wrote an email to the new SVP of Customer, Annika. Subject: Pre-read materials for Beacon Demo, data lineage. I wrote it like a person who has built a long habit of being useful. Hi Annika, Emily here from Product Analytics. I'm supporting the Beacon demo later this morning. I've attached a brief doc on data lineage and model assumptions. You don't need to read now. Just wanted to make sure we have it handy if questions come up about model origin, validation, and bias mitigation. Looking forward to the discussion. I CC'd legal, not HR. Legal. 3 minutes later, Annika replied, "Thanks, Emily. Appreciate the diligence. We'll review." 10 minutes after that, legal replied, "Saved. We'll be in the room." The hum in my chest settled into something tighter, cleaner. Not calm, but purpose. At 8:50 a.m., I walked into boardroom A again. Same pastries, same AC. Darren smiled at me this time with too many teeth. "Ready?" he asked, like a man about to ride a wave he hadn't noticed was already curling over his head. "Always," I said. The executives filed in. The CEO nodded at no one. The CFO opened a leather notebook and clicked a pen you could probably mortgage a studio apartment with. Annika sat, took out her tablet, and, this mattered, opened my pre-read. "Good morning," Darren said at 9:02. He adjusted his cuffs. He looked like a brochure for confidence. "I'm excited to share an initiative my team has been incubating, an approach to churn, reframed." He clicked, Slide 2. Slide 3. I took notes with neat, precise script. I wrote the time next to each turning, 9:04. Claims it solves multi-factor churn drivers. 8:07 says, I guided the team through several iterations. 9:11 calls lantern beacon. My annoyance like a hangnail I refused to touch. At 9:15, he reached the demo. He gestured at me. "Emily can pull up the dashboard." I felt every eye turn toward me. The room sound thinned. The projector hum sharpened. I stood, walked to the side console, and woke the laptop. I opened the dashboard with its clean, careful lines. The table glided into view. The top risk accounts ticked into place, each with its pathway annotations like notches on a map. It looked good. It looked undeniable. We ran through a scenario. Annika asked a question about cohort drift, and I answered it carefully, simply, like I was explaining gravity to a third grader. The CFO asked about ROI. I pointed him to the uplift numbers from A/B pilots in 2 regions. The CEO asked the only question CEOs ever ask about data. Are we sure? I met his eyes and said, "As sure as you can be before you do the thing, sir." The early signal's strong. We were at 9:19 when Darren said it. The sentence that opened the door I'd been building in my head. "From the start," he said, casual but proud. I envisioned this as a way to recenter our retention playbook. From the start. Annika's head tilted. "Who authored the initial prototype?" she asked, almost gentle. Darren smiled. Cross-functional effort, he said. I led the vision. Emily and the team executed flawlessly. Annika didn't smile back. Could we look at the version history of the deck and the prototype? She asked. Given compliance concerns, I'd like provenance on record. Everything in the room shifted. Just an inch. Credit to her. She made it sound like a paperwork thing, not a trust thing. But we all understood. Darren's smile tightened. We don't need to get into the weeds, he said lightly. Please, the CFO said, already reaching for my pre-read on his tablet. He had that hawk look again. Let's see the origin. I looked at Darren. He looked at me. And for the first time since he'd perched himself on my work like a bird on a branch, I saw it. Uncertainty. Emily? Annika said, voice smooth. Could you open version history? My pen line in my notebook, ask to open version history, glowed like a small, sharp star. I clicked. The slide deck panel slid open. A list of versions bloomed on the right side of the screen, each with a date and a name. At the bottom, created by Emily Park, Lantern V1, date. Above it, Lantern V0.4, Emily. Beacon V1, Darren H. Next to a later date, much later, silence. The kind that isn't empty. Just listening. Darren exhaled through his nose, a little laugh. Of course. Emily did excellent groundwork, he said quickly. I refactored and, can you open the first version? Annika asked. I clicked. The first slide appeared. Lantern, Retention Prediction and Pathways, by Emily Park. My original subtitle. My name in the bottom corner like a small candle that had survived the wind. The CEO leaned forward. And the prototype? I switched windows. The dashboard's commit log opened in a pop-out. Lines of text in a font no one in that room thought about except people like me. The author names. The commit messages. It wasn't flashy. It was a ledger. It told the truth the way gravity tells it. Without passion, without mercy. The CFO capped his pen. Thank you, he said to me. Then he turned his head to Darren. Why would you present this as your initiative? Darren's mouth opened. He held his hands up halfway, like the room had pulled a gun. This is how we present, he said, voice thinner. I consolidate. I own the executive relationship. The team executes. We all win. Annika's gaze cut him clean. Or we credit people appropriately, she said. No heat, just fact. She glanced at me. Emily, can you step us through the bias controls again? Then she looked back at Darren. We'll talk afterwards. I swallowed. My throat tasted like copper and relief. I stepped through the controls. I explained how I'd built the model to avoid punishing customers for behaviors correlated with under-resourced teams. I talked about intervention pathways that didn't just throw discounts at the problem. I didn't gloat. I didn't let my voice shake. I just did the work I always did, and I let it be seen. At 9:27, the CEO said, "Good work." He looked at me when he said it. Then he looked at Darren and didn't say anything at all. We ended the meeting there, ostensibly for time. As people stood, Darren touched my elbow. His fingers were cool. A word? He murmured. I looked down at his hand until it moved. In the hallway, he stood too close. What the hell was that? He said in a hiss. Provenance, I said softly. For legal's sake. You blindsided me, he said. You erased me, I said. He blinked. The mask fluttered and didn't quite settle back. We'll handle this, he said. Don't do anything stupid. He walked away with his shoulders still broad, but something had narrowed in the way he moved. Like he'd suddenly discovered his shoes were a half size too small. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. My hands were steady again. The hum in my bones quieted long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat, and, underneath it, a new sound, faint but present. The crack of a fault line, widening. At 10:03, an email hit my inbox from HR. We'd like to schedule time today to discuss the Beacon presentation. CHRO, CC'd. Legal CCD, Annika CC'd. Darren, not. The dam had found its river. At 10:03 a.m., HR's email landed like a gavel. We'd like to schedule time today to discuss the beacon presentation. Legal was on it. Annika was on it. Darren wasn't. That CC list felt like oxygen after weeks of breathing through a straw. I stood in the quiet of a conference room no one had booked yet, and watched the city traffic braid itself into loops. My palms were cold, so I pressed them flat on the table until the chill snapped me into focus. This wasn't the victory. It was the opening. And openings disappear if you stare at them too long, trying to decide whether you deserve to walk through. I opened my laptop and did something very boring and very powerful. I wrote an email with a subject line that would be impossible to misfile. Subject: Beacon, Lantern, Model Ownership, Data Lineage and Next Steps, Post-Exec Review Summary. In the body, I used that neutral surgical tone that people mistake for meekness until it cuts. I thanked everyone for their time. I summarized the 3 decisions the room had agreed on without explicitly voting. Proceed with regional pilots using the Lantern prototype. Validated uplift, 10.6% on Cohort B. Document model assumptions, fairness checks, and intervention pathways in a single model card before org-wide rollout, capture. Provenance for all materials, deck plus prototype, and name a model owner of record. Then I wrote the sentence that reattached my name to my work like a vein reconnecting. Per version history reviewed in the meeting. Initial prototype and deck authored by Emily Park. Serving as model owner effective immediately. I attached my tidy provenance doc and the deck, with version history already peeking out like a receipt. I sent it to everyone who'd been in the room. Legal replied within 4 minutes. Captured. Thank you. My hands stopped shaking. I walked straight to Maya's desk. She looked up at me with that mix of joy and anger reserved for friends who've watched you carry something heavy in silence. Well, she asked. Imagine a movie where the villain smiles while his reflection in the window drops its grin, I said. That. Her eyebrows flew up. They saw the version history? They asked to, I said. Twice. She grinned, then sobered. He's not going to just back down. I know, I said. That's why I'm going to build something he can't kick down. We booked a tiny focus room and shut the door. I laid out my plan like a map, each step small, lawful, unambiguous. I'd learned the hard way that moral high ground is only useful if it has documentation. Preserve the ground. I forwarded the critical files, provenance doc, commit logs, legal checklist, early emails, to legal, and saved the email chain to our compliance archive. I asked, politely and on record, whether a preservation hold on Lantern beacon materials would be appropriate. Their answer was 1 word, yes. 2, witnesses, not allies. Allies can be dismissed as biased. Witnesses have dates and times. I asked Maya to write a brief statement, not feelings, just facts. The day she helped me debug the export. The night she saw Darren ask me to move my name. The note-taker invite. The hallway remark, don't do anything stupid. We stamped it with timestamps, screenshots where possible. Policy, not politics. I pulled our model governance policy. Nobody reads it until they need to. It was plain. Every model impacting customers must name a model owner. Misrepresentation in executive materials violates our code of conduct. Integrity, in word and representation. There's a paragraph under retaliation so clear it might as well be carved in glass. Any adverse action taken in response to a good faith report will result in disciplinary action up to and including termination. I highlighted 3 sentences and pasted them into a memo. Bread. Crumbs the right people could follow. I submitted an ethics line report, not anonymous but confidential, summarizing the facts, citing policy, attaching evidence. I wasn't telling them how to punish him. I was telling them a story so linear that the end wrote itself. Maya watched me work, knees tucked under her chair, face a study in concentration. Are you scared? She asked quietly. Yes, I said. Not of him. Of being almost there and then, losing it because I blinked. She rubbed her hands together, warming them. You won't blink, but you should eat. I laughed, startled by the gentleness of it. We split a granola bar like college students cramming for exams. My body remembered hunger. That felt like a kind of turning too. At 11:40 a.m., my calendar pinged, Beacon presentation, follow-up, HR, legal, Annika, CEO's chief of staff at 2:00 p.m. I blocked the hour before it as prep and used it to do nothing except breathe and list questions I wouldn't ask but might be asked. What do you want? Credit on the work and an environment where this doesn't keep happening. Are you seeking discipline? I'm seeking integrity. Consequences are not my purview. Did you try to resolve it directly? Yes. Here, and here. At 1:58 p.m., I took the last 2 seats of an empty hallway and then walked into a room full of carpet that looked like it had never met a shoe that wasn't expensive. The CHRO was already there, eyes kind but guarded. Legal had a folder. The CEO's chief of staff had a pen poised like a conductor's baton. Annika nodded once as if to say, "Now we do the boring, important part." Darren arrived at 2:03 p.m. His hair was perfect. His smile was almost perfect. He sat, crossed one ankle over his knee, and then saw the attendee list on the wall display. His ankle uncrossed by itself. The CHRO opened with procedure. Thank you both for joining. This is a fact-finding conversation following this morning's executive review. She turned to me. Emily, you sent a post-meeting summary and a provenance document. Can you step us through your timeline? I did, slowly, without heat. I didn't say stole. I said, presented as primary author. I didn't say lied. I said, misrepresented origin. I brought up the version history, the commit log, the legal checklist email addressed to me, the JIRA ticket I opened on the first day. I shared my note about Darren's "don't do anything stupid" comment, flagged explicitly as my recollection, and attached the calendar inviting me to take notes at stakeholder alignment. Legal's face never moved, but their pen did when I mentioned retaliation. I watched it. It made my spine longer. Darren wheeled out the well-used furniture. This is a misunderstanding about timelines and the nature of executive communication, he said smoothly. I've been consolidating and elevating Emily's work to make it land. We're a team. I've given her tremendous exposure, Annika said. Leaving her off the invite? He didn't flinch. Oversight. Moving her name to acknowledgements? The chief of staff asked. Standard deck hygiene, he said. We need a single presenter. Legal didn't glance up when they asked their first question. Mr. Hall, they said, the name crisp as a folded note. Did you, at any point, represent yourself as the originator of the model or deck in written communications? Darren hesitated for the first time. Originator is a loaded term. Annika slid her tablet slightly forward. In your pre-brief, you called it my initiative and the way I reframed churn. That's not loaded. That's declarative, he pivoted. Look, I bring the narrative. Emily brings the analysis. I brought both, I said softly, and let the sentence hang. The CHRO interlaced her fingers. Thank you. We'll be reviewing all artifacts. In the meantime, we want to be clear. Any retaliation, formal or informal, will be considered a separate violation. He nodded, smile restored by muscle memory. Of course. The meeting ended with the kind of politeness you buy, not feel. As we stood, Darren said lightly to the room, Emily and I are good. Aren't we, Emily? I looked at him for a long second. It wasn't a dramatic stare. It was the stare you give a man who's just tried to conjure a rope from a sentence. We're colleagues, I said. That's what we are. He left like a man who meant to regroup, not retreat. I didn't go back to my desk. I went to the quietest place I knew. The back staircase no one took except people who'd gotten lost once and never wanted to repeat it. I sat on a step and listened to the building breathe. Ductwork sighs, elevator cables humming, the faint clink of cutlery from some catered meeting that wasn't mine. I texted Maya one word, rolling. She replied with a whale emoji because she said all big things are whales. The next 48 hours were a montage of mundane ferocity. Audit lock. Legal placed a preservation hold on channels tagged lantern, beacon, retention, and pointedly, exec pre-read. It flipped the invisible switches that make deletion and edits feel like they work to the user, while being perfectly captured behind the scenes. I learned that a week later. I didn't need to then. I just needed to know someone bigger than me was holding the net. Pattern, not one-off. People started drifting by my desk. Quietly, a PM named Rishi, who'd had a roadmap rewritten in a meeting and given to Darren to own. A designer named Jules who'd watched Darren rename her. Interaction pattern operations wizardry in a wiki. None of them wanted drama. All of them had time-stamped evidence. With permission, I compiled short summaries and attached them to my ethics line case as context. Careful to stick to dates and artifacts, not adjectives. Model card. I wrote the model card like a person building a bridge out of statements no one could later undo. I listed model owner, Emily Park. I listed reviewers, legal, data governance, customer ops. I put the fairness checks right next to the value proposition so no one could bury them. I included a section called Provenance and Evolution, with a table marking every hand that touched the work, including Darren's contributions, renamed initiative, reordered slides, proposed executive narrative framing, not mockery, transparency, public without being loud. I asked the PMO to schedule a lantern pilot kickoff. Invitees, regional leaders, customer success heads, data governance, legal. Presenter, Emily Park, model owner. I asked Annika if she'd be willing to open with a statement about the importance of provenance in data-driven initiatives. She wrote back, happily. The meeting invite went out with the subject line exactly as I'd written it. People notice subject lines. People especially notice the ones that fire clean, through previous narratives like an arrow. Darren tried things. He sent me edits. To the model card that moved model owner to team, then listed executive sponsor, Darren Hall, owner of narrative. I replied with the governance policy attached and a line that could have been a shrug if it weren't also a boundary. Per policy, the card must name a single accountable owner. Exec sponsor is optional. I've kept sponsors to SVP, customer, and legal. He created a new doc titled Beacon Strategy and assigned tasks to me with deadlines aggressive enough to be their own kind of comment. I moved them into my backlog with notes. Dependent on model card approval per governance. ETA after legal sign-off, I CC'd. Legal on the note. Neutral, unignorable. He pinged a cross-functional channel with a summary of our work and a line about shepherding this from whiteboard to boardroom. I responded on the thread with a 2-sentence correction and a link to the model card in the knowledge base, clarifying for anyone following along. Lantern, aka Beacon, originated from a prototype I authored. Doc covers provenance and assumptions. Thanks all for the enthusiasm on the pilot. I didn't own him. I didn't need to. The link did the work. The weirdest part of a shift like this is how quiet it feels while it's happening. No fireworks, no soundtrack. Just small sentences landing in the right inboxes at the right times, like snow that becomes a roadblock by never stopping. The day before the kickoff, Annika stopped by my desk. I didn't hear her. I felt the tiny change in air pressure that means someone has entered your weather. How are you holding up? She asked. I keep expecting to feel triumphant, I said. Instead, I feel accurate, she nodded. Accuracy is expensive in organizations, she said. It costs attention. It costs patience. It costs ego. Most people underpay. She glanced toward the glass-walled conference rooms, where the day performed itself. You did not. I must have made a face because she smiled, almost apologetic. It's not poetry, but it is justice. Justice feels like paperwork, I said. Sometimes paperwork is the only thing heavier than a title, she said. May I make a suggestion? Please. End the kickoff with a slide called People. Names, roles, work. Say them out loud. Ask if you missed anyone. Let the room feel what correct feels like. I swallowed. I will. She started to turn, then paused. One more thing. Compliance has flagged something in parallel. You'll hear about it soon. A prickle walked up my arms. What kind of something? Pattern, she said, the same word I'd been using in my head. Unrelated projects. Related behavior. When she left, I opened a blank doc and wrote the people slide. It was just names and verbs, no adjectives. It looked simple and cost me a year's worth of breath. That evening, as I packed my bag, I noticed a new shared folder had appeared in our team drive. Beacon, Executive Comms, Final. Access. Me, Darren, comms. I clicked. Inside were 2 decks. One was mine, renamed to Beacon Lantern Pilot Kickoff Final. The other was Beacon Story V2. Its owner was Darren. I opened it. The first slide was him on a stage at a previous company. The second was a timeline that began with Executive Reframing of Churn Narrative. A heat rose from my chest into my jaw. Then I took a breath and did the one thing that mattered. I took a screenshot of the folder view with timestamps and owners. I closed the deck. I emailed legal, short and dull. For record keeping, saw a new deck, Beacon Story V2, implying reframing. Attaching screenshot. Focused on Lantern Pilot tomorrow per plan, they replied. Noted. The kickoff morning felt like the air itself had been wiped with glass cleaner. Light, bright, a little too sharp. People filed into the room, some in person, some as grid squares on the giant monitor. The room smelled like pastries again, like we were repeating a ritual until it delivered something true. Annika opened. She talked about customer retention, about attention as a finite resource, and about how models don't just predict, they aim. And when you aim, she said, you are accountable for where the arrow lands. Then she said, without flourish, ownership matters. Provenance matters. That's not politics. That's safety. I walked to the console. My hands were steady. My voice found the register I use when I care so much I can't afford to sound like it. I told the story of Lantern. No branding flourish, just problem, data, approach. I showed the uplift. I showed the do no harm section. Questions flowed like water over stone, and I answered until the questions stopped being about the model and started being about scheduling the work. Then I put up the people slide. Before we break, I said, I want to name the humans who built this. These models live in our heads and our nights before they live in slides. If I miss anyone, say their name. I read them out. Maya, data integrity checks and pipeline QA. Rishi, pilot scoping and measurable outcomes. Jules, interaction patterns for pathway cards. Legal, privacy review. Data governance, bias audit. Darren, executive narrative framing and renaming. A small sound moved through the room, something between relief and recognition. On the screen, faces nodded. In person, someone clapped once. Then we all pretended we didn't hear it. Annika said, "Thank you," like someone had finally paid a bill. Afterwards, people milled. Darren lingered at the edge like a guest deciding whether to stay for dessert. He approached when most had left, smile taped neatly in place. "That was solid," he said. "Nice touch with the names." "It's policy now," I said. "Right?" His eyes narrowed, almost imperceptibly. "We should present this together to the board next quarter," he said. "You own the guts. I own the room." "I own the room when the room is about my work," I said, not unkindly. "You're welcome to sponsor." He exhaled through his nose, almost a laugh. "You know the game now," he said. "Congratulations." "I knew the game," I said. "I just changed the rules to match the handbook." He leaned in a fraction. "Careful," he said softly. I didn't step back. "Me or you?" We held that look for a beat. It wasn't cinematic. It was tiring. Then he left, shoulders square, phone already in his hand. At 3:11 p.m., my inbox pinged. Subject, compliance review, interview scheduling, policy 2. 3. Integrity and attribution. Sender, internal audit. Recipients, me, Darren. CC, legal, CHRO, Annika. Body. We've initiated a formal review regarding representation of work authorship and potential retaliation. Please hold all related communications and materials. We will meet Friday at 10 a.m. Attendance required. Attached. A 1-page extract of Policy 2.3 with 2 paragraphs highlighted. Misrepresentation of material work in executive settings, and retaliation following a good faith report. My pulse slowed as I read the last line of the extract. 4 words that felt like a stamp sealing wax. Violations may result in termination. Friday, 9:56 a.m. The hallway outside internal audit felt colder than the rest of the floor, like the AC had an opinion. The conference room door was heavy, slow to close, engineered for quiet. Inside, a long table, white walls, a glass pitcher sweating onto a cork coaster. The kind of room where lives don't end exactly, just job titles. I sat with my back to the window. Across from me, a legal pad, a glass of water, and the printed extract of Policy 2.3, Integrity and Attribution. Someone had underlined material misrepresentation. The pen stroke dug into the paper. At 9:59, the internal audit lead came in, a woman with hair pinned back and a voice that sounded like it had processed 1,000 stories. Legal took the seat next to her, laptop already open. The CHRO sat at the far end, hands folded, palms pressed together like she was keeping something from spilling. Annika slid into a chair near the corner, tablet awake, expression unreadable. The CEO's chief of staff hovered, then sat, then opened a notebook. Everyone had a role. Everyone had a reason. Darren arrived at 10:02. He smiled as if entering a party that might still love him. He wore a navy suit, the kind you buy to impress people who know better. When he sat, the chair creaked in a small, perfect betrayal. The audit lead started with ground rules: recording, confidentiality, documentation holds. Then she looked at me. Emily, walk us through the origin of Lantern and the renaming to Beacon. Dates, documents. We'll ask clarifying questions as needed. I'd practice this. Not the words, the spine. Lantern began on March 3rd, I said. JIRA ticket AN 4821. Retention Prediction Exploration. I authored the initial prototype and deck. Version history shows creation under my account. March 7th. On April 18th, Darren asked to help shape the narrative for executives. On May 2nd, the deck title changed to Operation Beacon, under his account. On May 9th, I was removed from an exec pre-brief invite. Evidence is in the shared folder, Lantern evidence, personal, and in the company archive under Legal's hold. I put the printed commit log on the table like a deck of cards. No flourish, just gravity. Commits on March 14th, 21, 28, all by me. April 4th, Maya assisted with data integrity checks. Pair programming session, screenshotted. April 18th, Slack. Thread, your Lantern idea might be the thing that saves Q3, from Darren to me. April 25th, legal email. Data checklist initiated under my name. The audit lead made marks on her pad, fast, even. And representation at the executive pre-brief? Darren positioned Beacon as his initiative, I said. He moved my name to the acknowledgement slide. He did not include me in the pre-brief. I attended the main review as technical support. When Annika requested version history, we saw the origin. Created by Emily Park on the deck, and my author stamps on the prototype. The audit. Lead nodded, then turned her face toward Darren without moving her shoulders. Mr. Hall, describe your contributions. He leaned back, palms open. I reframed Churn for the executive audience, ensured the narrative landed, and shepherded the work into the right rooms. That's not trivial. That is the job. Did you present the work as your own? She asked, crisp as a snapped ruler. I presented the initiative under my remit, he said, which is also the job. Did you omit Ms. Park from critical meetings? Legal asked. I may have unintentionally missed an invite, he said, smile professional, voice smooth. I relied on her for technical backup in the main room. She was there. And the renaming? Audit asked. Beacon tested better, he said. Lantern felt small. Annika looked up from her tablet then, first time. Names aren't neutral, she said. They're vectors. They point credit. He shifted. A flicker of something, irritation maybe, or the realization that a new set of rules had quietly been posted, while he was rehearsing the old ones. "We're splitting hairs," he said. "The company benefited from me carrying this to the finish line." Audit didn't blink. "We'll let the timeline speak." She slid a printed sheet across to him. I recognized the layout. IT logs. She tapped a line with the capped end of her pen. "On Wednesday, 6:42 p.m., you opened the shared drive folder, Beacon, Executive Comms, Final. At 6:47 p.m., you created a file, Beacon Story, V2, and moved it to a private folder. At 7:12 p.m., you attempted to delete 3 Slack messages in the GAR Ops Leadership channel referencing my initiative, and I reframed churn, and I'll own the room. Emily will handle the detail. GAR. Those deletes were preserved under the hold. She tapped another line. On Thursday, 8:11 a.m., you edited Emily's model card to change model owner to team. Executive sponsor, Darren Hall, owner of narrative. The file was rolled back 3 minutes later by Ms. Park with the governance policy attached. He sat perfectly still, then smiled again, smaller. "You're making inference from admin noise." "We're reading logs," Audit said. "Compliance is not inference." Legal slid a second sheet toward him. "We have corroborating statements from other employees regarding similar incidents. Credit reassignment, meeting exclusions, and representational misstatements over the past 6 months. We are consolidating those separately." His eyes sharpened. "Anonymous complaints," he said, the word anonymous rounded like a bruised fruit. "Not anonymous," Legal said, calm. "Confidential." Then, a beat later, like a door quietly locked. "Protected." He shifted his gaze to me and, for the first time since he'd put his hand on my elbow after the meeting, I saw the thing under the charm, an old, tired contempt. "You could have come to me," he said, as if he hadn't heard me say I had. "You could have let me carry you up." "I built the ladder," I said. My voice was steady. "You asked me to leave my name on the ground floor." The CHRO exhaled through her nose. The audit lead flipped her pad to a fresh page. "We'll each make closing statements," the audit lead said. "Mr. Hall?" He cleared his throat. "I operate at the executive layer," he said. "I did my job. The company needs translation. If we punish people for carrying narratives, we will suffocate our speed. We will reward technocrats and punish leaders." The room didn't move. The problem with practiced lines is that sometimes they hit an audience that stopped buying tickets. "Ms. Park?" Audit asked, turning to me. I'd written something the night before and then thrown it away. In rooms like this, adjectives curdle. I stayed with nouns and verbs. "I don't want anyone to be punished for telling a story," I said. "I want the stories to be true. I built Lantern. I asked for credit and access and was denied both. I documented because I had to. The work is good. It will help customers and our teams. It will not be less good because my name is on it. It will be safer." I paused. "I want 3 things. Clear authorship, enforcement of the retaliation policy, and a path for others to not have to do what I did. If you choose consequences for Mr. Hall, that's your role. My role is the work." Audit nodded once, a small endorsement of sentences that landed like stamps. "Thank you." The meeting ended not with fireworks but with a schedule. HR would notify us of outcomes. In the meantime, the hold remained, and a temporary reporting arrangement would be put in place. Me to Annika for the project's duration, bypassing ops. We stood. Chairs whispered on carpet. Paper rustled. Door heavy. AC opinionated. In the hallway, Darren paced his smile back into place. "No hard feelings," he said to me as we reached the elevator. "No more erasures," I said. He looked like he wanted to say something else, then didn't. The elevator dinged. He stepped in. I stayed. The fallout arrived in the form "Corporation's Favor," an email with the subject line, Leadership update. Product operations. Sent at 3:42 p.m. to all staff. It was 3 paragraphs long. Effective immediately. Darren Hall is no longer with the company. No adjectives. No thank you for your service. Just the sentence and the structure around it. Product operations will report to the SVP of customer on an interim basis. A faint second wave rolled through the building. DMs, side eyes, sighs, the tiny pop of an open soda can somewhere in celebration. My Slack pounced. Rishi. Coffee later? Jules. Your people slide made me cry at my desk, you menace. A DM from someone I barely knew in finance. When you said names out loud, I felt my shoulders drop for the first time in months. Thank you. I didn't answer all of them. I closed my laptop and stood by the window and let the city insert itself back into my body. Sirens far off. Buses exhaling. The sun bouncing off glass like stubborn hope. HR scheduled a follow-up on Monday. Different room, same temperature. They handed me a document, formal acknowledgement, no retaliation. I signed. They asked if I wanted to file anything else. I said no. They told me 2 things I didn't expect. First, we're making the people slide a requirement for all major reviews. Policy update goes out next week. I felt something uncoil in my chest. The tight wire I'd been calling a spine replaced by something more human. Second, we're adjusting your title, the CHRO said. Principal Product Analyst, effective immediately. Compensation will be adjusted accordingly. You'll also serve on the Data Product Council for Model Governance. We'd like you to help write the new guidance. I nodded, and then embarrassingly laughed. It wasn't a pretty laugh. It was the sound a body makes when it's been bracing for a blow and gets a hand instead. I can do that, I said. Afterwards, I walked the long way back to my desk, past the break area where someone had abandoned an open bag of pretzels, past the wall where the company's values were printed in vinyl letters that had started to peel at the corners. Integrity. Customer obsession. One had fallen off, leaving a sticky ghost. I hoped they'd replace it with something tackier, something that sticks. Maya found me with 2 coffees and a look like a person who's been practicing I told you so in the mirror and chose not to use it. Principal? She said, like a toast. How does it feel to promote your own name back into your life? Louder than I expected, I said. Quieter in my head. We took our coffees to the back staircase, the secret oxygen pocket, and sat on the same step where I'd texted rolling. The building breathed around us. I told her the parts that weren't in the email, the microscopic humiliations, the deep sleep I'd had for the first time in weeks. She listened with her chin on her knees, eyes bright. The kind of friend who knows that sometimes the victory lap is just letting your shoulders down. I brought you something, she said, digging in her tote. She handed me a sticky note. On it, in her round handwriting, provenance is power. Under it, a doodle of a small lantern with rays. You're ridiculous, I said. I stuck it inside my notebook anyway. Word gets around. I got 3 requests in the next week to take a look at other teams' credit practices. Quiet, cautious messages, like birds landing. I reminded each person. Document. Root through policy. Pull legal early. Ask simple questions in big rooms. One question in particular, could we open version history? Darren's name bled off the walls quickly. That's the thing about borrowed paint. It chips. I didn't hear where he went. I didn't need to. People asked. I said nothing. The story wasn't my trophy. It was my boundary. Lantern rolled out to 2 regions. Uplift held at 10% and then crept to 12%. We killed a discount play that harmed low-touch accounts and doubled a training intervention that made adoption sticky. People stopped calling it Beacon. The name had never fit. A month later, the CEO stopped me in a hallway I didn't belong in and said, "Good work." He meant the model. Maybe he also meant the paperwork. Maybe he meant the quiet. Some victories arrive coded. You learn to read them. On a Wednesday night, I left before sunset for the first time in a long time. The sky was pink like a soft bruise healing. I passed a bar where a happy hour swallowed people whole, and a bookstore that put staff pics in the window with handwritten notes. I bought a paperback because the note said, "For when you need a precise sentence to stand on." The cashier put it in a paper bag with a little stamp. a tiny lantern. I walked home and put the book on the kitchen table and stood in my small, ordinary apartment and listened. No hum, no drum, just the sound of a fridge that works and a city settling and a heart that finally had room. Justice didn't feel like thunder. It felt like alignment, like a spine uncurled, like a name said out loud in a room that had never learned to say it. And when I slept like a person whose work had finally learned to wear her face. If you've ever watched someone take your work and call it theirs, you know the particular ache it brands into your ribs. It's not just the hours, that's part of it. It's the erasure, the way a story mutates without your name on it, the quiet question that crawls into your bed. Does my work count if I'm not allowed to own it? Here's what I learned dragging lantern through rooms that preferred beacon. Documentation is a kindness you do for your future self. Provenance isn't petty, it's ethical. It protects customers from reckless narratives and protects teams from the kind of leadership that's only loudness in a suit. Ask simple questions with big consequences. Could we open version history? Who authored the prototype? Who made the call when it was hard? I didn't hack anything. I didn't record anyone secretly. I didn't swing at faces. I used our policies like doors and walked through them. I made witnesses out of timestamps. I learned that justice in offices often arrives on the back of boring verbs. Preserve, submit, review, update. Boring verbs with sharp edges. Darren didn't get fired because I wanted him fired. He got fired because when the company looked at the map, they saw he'd been drawing himself in places he never walked. They saw the pattern. They decided the brand wasn't built to carry that weight. And me? I didn't win the way the movies sell victory. There was no standing ovation. No parade, no perfect last word. I won the right to name my work, and the responsibility to make sure others get to do the same. I won the most adult prize there is. A culture shaped one policy at a time, one name at a time, until a room becomes a place where your work arrives with you, not ahead of you. If you're there now, in the hum, in the ache, document, ask, pull policy into the light. And remember, you don't need to be loud to be undeniable. You just need to be accurate, longer than they can be charming. If this story hit a nerve, you're not alone. Tap like to push this into more hands that need receipts. Subscribe for more true, lived-through revenge stories where the paperwork is the plot twist. And if you've had your credit stolen, drop your story in the comments. Say your name. We'll help you make sure the room hears it.